Um, marriage is a lifelong um, contract here. And boy, it is no fun to be married to somebody, husband or wife, as the case might be, who has this kind of attitude. Um, Matthew Henry, writing about this passage, wrote, "Observe how those are to be pitied that are, as he called it, unequally yoked, especially with such as are brawling and contentious, whether husband or wife. It is equally true of both. It is better to be alone than to be joined to one who, instead of being a helpmeet, is a great hindrance to the comfort of life." It's not a verse that gives us permission to divorce. Certainly there were different laws in the Old and the New, but I do think it's a reminder that the choice we make, we have to live with, and character matters and attitude matters. It reminds us of something that we'll look at in the 31st chapter, when he talks there about the virtuous woman, the worthy woman, and how blessed this husband is, for example, to be married to a woman like this. People say, oh, Solomon was a misogynist. Solomon was against women. Solomon, certainly as an inspired man, wrote against evil, whether it be in men or women. But he also praised righteous men and righteous women. And here we find an example of the latter. Proverbs 31, of course I realize Solomon didn't write this, but it is nevertheless true that in this book of Proverbs we find virtue extolled in both genders. And of course Solomon writes early on about the wisdom as being in the feminine form. Lady Wisdom speaks to us and calls us to a better life. In this passage in Proverbs 31, we find the worthy woman being extolled as a blessing to her husband. She opens her mouth, verse 26, with wisdom. In her tongue is the law of kindness. What a contrast between the woman bitter in speech, who would run everybody in the house out just by her attitude and her sharp tongue, and this woman in whose tongue resides the law of kindness. Verse 30, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. This is the point we're trying to make, that the wise man says, if you're looking for one to spend your life with, look for more than just outer looks. Look for the inner beauty. Look for character. Favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. And so it is. Okay. I might just make one more point about our text before we move on. And that is that I think that this passage, at least indirectly, reminds us of the limited effectiveness of angry words. Better to dwell on the housetop than in a wide house with a brawling woman. And frankly, in a lot of cases, that's where a fellow go. He'll go somewhere. But her angry words don't get what she's after. I think it's a fair question to ask, and broader than we're going to cover it now. If we're looking at this relationship where the wife is becoming embittered and the husband is looking for some reason to get away from her, we might ask questions like, well, how did she get this way? Was she always this way? And what have you done to embitter her? I think a lot of things that, if we were looking at this case in more depth, but just taking it as it is, and we'll just assume for a moment the bitter-tongued individual is wanting and desiring something, and she's using this as a tactic to try to get her way. It's not working very well. And that's true generally. When married couples are looking to try to work on a problem, angry, bitter words and a sharp tongue are not very good tools for accomplishing anything worth accomplishing. When my wife and I got married, I'm sure you've seen things like this. We had it hanging up for years, some little cheap poster that we'd found somewhere. Um, and it was something like entitled "The 10 Rules for Marriage" or something like that. And it had several good little sayings on it. And one of them was, and I think I can just about quote this: never shout at one another unless the house is on fire. Um, well, there's a lot of truth in that. Uh, a relationship where loud, angry words fly up and down the hallway all the time is just not a relationship that's being guided by divine wisdom. And that kind of attitude, that kind of display, doesn't get us where we're looking to get. If we're looking for happiness and joy and fulfillment and contentment, screaming at each other is not going to get there. And I might just add, by the way, again, this is beyond our text, but the same kind of spirit, but instead of loud, angry words, it might be maybe taking the form of, what do they call it now, passive aggressive, the silent treatment, all that. That's no good either. The point is, in this relationship, and there are a lot of questions that we don't know, the relationship in the text here, this woman who has become embittered and the man who's looking for any place to go but being with her. I'll tell you, putting that back together, bitterness and angry words are not going to get it done. And that's just a good lesson for all of us to keep in mind. If we're trying to talk to somebody, whether it be our spouse or someone else, and they're just full of loud, angry words, screaming, and obviously have lost control, it's just better to tell that person, look, I want to talk to you, but this is not doing either one of us any good right now. And we just need to, and we'll make another time when we both have got more control of ourselves, to try to work out these problems. But right now, this is not working and is not going to be productive toward good. On the other side of the street, the same point could be made about myself. If I find in myself a spirit that is on the edge of being out of control, not the time for me to engage in a talk with my spouse or with my neighbor, brother, whoever it might be. It's the time to rein in our emotions and to let them know we're not trying to walk away from this problem, but we both need to be calm, and I'm afraid I'm not. So I need to do some praying, and I'll get back to you. This is again a little bit off the subject, but I got some great advice when our kids were little from a wise old fellow. I asked him one time, because I'd heard people say things like, well, don't spank your children, discipline your children when you're angry, And I asked him about that. And this is what he said. He said, I disciplined my children when I was angry. He said, I wanted them to know I was angry. He said, God disciplines when he's angry. But he said, what you don't ever want to do is discipline your children when you're out of control. And I thought that was a very important distinction. It's not a sin to be angry. It's a sin to be a brawler. It's a sin to be bitter. It's a sin to be out of control and let our emotions run our tongue and run our speech and whatever else we're doing. So, good lesson there, I think. You don't want to marry someone and then your life turn out to be this verse where you're trying to hang on to the corner of the housetop rather than be with them because of their bad attitude. If I find myself to be that one who has the bad attitude, I got to realize that's a dead-end street. And I've got to back up, and I've got to change my attitude so that we can draw closer together instead of pushing people away from me. And if we're trying to deal with another, just recognize the fact that temper can ruin our efforts to do good. They can make our coming together for the worse and not for the better. Okay. All right. Well, I think rather than trying to run through this next one, we will pause for this time. Again, I so much appreciate your being a part of this and thinking along with us. And feel free always, if you have questions or something you'd like to follow up on, send that to us, and we'd be glad to hear from you. But until next time, then we pray that the Lord will bless you and that you'll be safe, and we'll look forward to opportunities to come again very soon. Thank you very much.